it seems like we're jumping from a 16th century way right into the 21st century, and a lot of us, there's an element of culture shock, and we have to adopt fast, or otherwise we seem to have been kind of lost in time. So to survive, we have to adapt to the new way of America here.
Many of us will have to start working at a low paying job, for example, probably cleaning or these washing dishes in restaurants, or doing some job that get a minimum pay. And as we learn more and more English, as we know more and more English, we then eventually move into the area that we at least can work and then can earn some decent wage.
The Hmong began their migration to the United States in the late 1970s. Many ended up in American cities such as Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In Milwaukee, local anthropologists interviewed scores of Hmong families about their migration experiences and cultural adjustments. Perhaps no cultural group worldwide was less prepared for life in a post-industrial metropolis than these Hmong. Hmong history goes back to at least 2000 BC in China. Most accounts portray a fiercely independent people that struggled to maintain their life ways in face of ethnic discrimination and political persecution. In the early 19th century, some Hmong began to migrate southward into the mountainous regions of Thailand, northern Burma, Vietnam, and Laos.
In Laos, where the Hmong believed that because of the vast unused land, that they would have the freedom of practicing their slash and burn agriculture. They would be better off than those who are in China. However, the Hmong in Laos also face discrimination.
Many of those who settled in Laos would end up in the United States. This all had to do with the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War and the secret war in Laos.
Laos was sort of behind the scene, but Laos was the place that the American military or soldiers set up cutting supply routes and so forth, setting station or radar station that would cut supply lines coming from North Vietnam into South Vietnam and into Cambodia. So that's why Laos somehow has to be involved in that Vietnam War. And then the American government at that time, the Central Intelligence Agency, did recruit the Hmong back in the very late 50s and also early part of 60s to be in the Vietnam War. And the Hmong have suffered a lot. About 40,000 or so had died during the war, including soldiers and family members and so forth.
In 1975, Laos gradually fell to the communists. The Hmong, many of whom had backed U.S. military and intelligence forces, faced genocide. Thousands of Hmong fled Laos, and many ended up in the Thai refugee camps. Life in these camps was not much of an improvement over the lives during the war. While in the refugee camps, many Hmong began to reflect on the tragedies and cultural disruption that had brought them to the camps. Hmong men and women had long been skilled in arts such as jewelry making, embroidery, and applique. In addition, missionaries in Laos had taught Hmong men in the 1960s to draw characters to illustrate school primers for Hmong children. In the camps, the Hmong men continued to draw the figures, and Hmong women began embroidering them onto cloth. At some time in the process, the Hmong began telling their tragic accounts through the needlework, and the end products became known as story cloths. Some refugees sold their cloths in the camps to help feed their families. In December 1975, Congress approved the immigration for some Hmong to the United States under the parole power of the U.S. Attorney General. A small group of Hmong refugees began arriving in the United States in 1976. The largest wave of Hmong immigrants came in the early 1980s, and others have trickled in ever since. The United States government set guidelines for which refugees would come to the United States. In general, the Hmong had to prove that their lives were in danger or that they had fought with the Americans in the war. They also needed committed sponsors to come to America. Most of the Hmong refugees that came to Milwaukee were sponsored by Lutheran and Catholic social services, and later, the earlier arriving Hmong sponsored their own family members.
The United States immediately looked for a sponsor that will help our family obtain job and become self-sufficient as soon as possible. So there was a Lutheran church in Lee County, Illinois, that was interested in sponsoring our family, and they were the one that provided the shelter, basically an apartment, a furnished apartment, and all of the necessary furniture and food and everything for our family.
When I first came to the United States, with the help of the Catholic charity that they have support me through, they sponsor me and then find a place for me to live. Even though my brothers-in-law and my sister they were the co-sponsor, but with the U.S. Catholic charity that really helped through my transition of coming to the USA.
Few of the Hmong who arrived in Wisconsin were briefed on what to expect here, and few of the early sponsors had any relevant information on Hmong culture. Most Hmong experienced immediate cultural shock.
I was very surprised because, we didn't have any snow in Laos, and when I came to America in 1976, the first day that I saw snow, I was extremely surprised, and I didn't even know that it was snow. So what happened was I went out to the yard with a barefoot, and wow, I felt it was so cold. And then my sponsor came and take me back inside the house. So and he told me it's snow.
They brought food to our family, but they brought bread, peanut butter, and potatoes and other food that we don't like. And so we're having some problems initially about getting the kind of food we like, but then later on when they found some Asians living close by, and they were told that we eat rice, and so then our sponsors went and got some rice for our family.
Over there in Asia, almost every country you go in Asia, there's a lot of people on the street, and come over here, it's kind of totally different. If I'm the only one person on the street, when I first came to this country, I feel very lonely. I feel totally different, and I feel like this is not my home.
The Hmong, who had lost so many lives in Laos and whose cultural and life practices had been wrenched from them by the war and the camps, now faced radically new challenges. Very few of the intricate life skills the Hmong had acquired in their mountain homes were relevant for this new world. Every facet of daily living in urban America involved new learning experiences.
I did not know how to use the electricity or the gas stove. So we have to learn that. Even the toilet, we have to learn how to use that. And then banking, that's another thing that we didn't use back in Laos, but we have to learn how to use it when we came here. Taking the right bus to the right places, it's another thing. Learning the language, it's quite a challenge to a lot of us, especially the elderly people. They didn't have a chance to go to school at all. So learning how to speak in another language without knowing how to read and write your own language, it's quite difficult to many Hmong elderly. Until nowadays, many of them still cannot speak the language.
As anthropologists have long pointed out, cultural practices emerge both as creative ways for social groups to interpret collective experiences and as adaptations to constraints and opportunities in the environment. The environment is not only physical, but it's also economic, social, political, and religious. In the mountains of Southeast Asia, the Hmong were subsistence farmers. As low-tech horticulturalists, Hmong households produced most of their basic necessities and rarely had access to anything else. In the post-industrial United States, most workers sold their labor, purchased their basic necessities, and much, much more.
The way of life back in Laos, the Hmong people were the hill tribe. People live in the higher elevation of the mountain. Their way of life for growing crop is to slash and burn, and the men did most of the heavy work, such as the outside work, such as slash and burn, cut, chop tree down, and clear jungles for planting. And the women did most of the domestic work, such as raise children and raise domestic animal for protein and vegetable.
Life in Laos is quite different from what we have down here. Back then, we did not have any running water. We do not have any car for transportation. Wherever we go, we walked. And then beside that, we use horses as a main transportation back then.
In their homelands, Hmong artisans and craftspeople commanded high status. Hmong art forms are praised for their intricacy, symbolic expression, and beauty. They now entered a world where artistry drew some respect, but the greatest status and economic resources tended to go to those with formal education and skills in advanced technology. In Southeast Asia, the Hmong had little access to education. Until very recently, they did not even have a written language.
The tradition of making jewelries and women making the colorful stitchery work for their customs have become the respected art or artistic skill. Here in the United States, we find that to be somewhat, well, we find it to be unproductive, unprofitable, simply because of the labor intensive and the time consuming. And a lot of people abandon that tradition.
In their mountain homelands, the social organization of the Hmong was based on large extended families, lineages, and highly complex clan systems. In the United States, families were relatively small, and few groups were organized along lineage or extended family lines. The U.S. economic system, with the emphasis on mobility and the selling of labor, tends to disperse rather than unify family groups.
In Laos, if you have a very large family, a typical Hmong man would have about 2 to 3 or 4 wives, and he would have a lot of kids. And it's a status. If the more wives you have, the bigger your status is, and the more kids you have, the bigger your status is. Also, having a large family, it's part of the society. It's an agricultural society, so you would need all the help you can get from a large family. In America here, we are changing. Still, the first generation, we still have about 6 to 7 children in our families, which sometimes it's hard to provide for. But the newer generation, they tend to want lesser kid, like 1 or 2 or 3, so that way they can provide for it, because the society in America is different from the society in Laos. So the family size in America tend to be different from the family size in Laos.
The Hmong had maintained highly defined gender roles in their homeland, and through contact with the West, confronted new statuses for women.
There's been such a difference and change in the roles of genders. Women have had to now learn how to read and write and drive and learn how to speak English. They are working in the employment world, and it's caused for an imbalance in the traditional Hmong family.
We have seen quite a number of families that the wives have become teachers or assistant principal, and the husband who have limited educational background that sometimes babysit the children at home.
In our culture, in our tradition, usually when a woman marries a man, that woman always keep her last name. It's our way of keeping her identity, because in our culture, we cannot marry someone with the same last name as ours, and so we always want the woman to keep her last name. But in this country, it's different, and that is some of the things that are changing. Some Hmong women in this country, when they marry, they change their last name to their husband's last name for legal purposes and other reasons.
In Southeast Asia, elders were revered. In their new homeland, youth tended to be the ideal.
Most Hmong people live on urban area or in the mountain area. And talking about education-wise, people always depend on the elders, taking their advice, what to do every day. Over here, difference that the kids, younger generation, they go to school, they get more education, and they get advice from their friends and at work and school and stuff more than from the elder. And I think that's why why the Hmong elder, they don't get respect as much as in back in Laos.
The children are taught to believe and also to respect the adults, and that it's become a very strong tradition within the Hmong community. But because nowadays the Hmong coming into this country realize that the language barrier, the cultural differences, and so forth, the language is very important to survive in America here. And so the adults who don't know the language run into a lot of difficulties. They have to now start accepting that the younger generations who have more educations will have to lead, will have to be at the head of the table, have to be the leaders of the clans, and so forth, even though still pay very high respect to the adults who have the older generation, the older men and women who still are very wise, but because of the language barrier, there is that change now.
Hmong anthropologist Gary Yia Lee points out the relationship between Hmong social organization and religion. As an elder-centered culture, Hmong spiritual beliefs had focused on reverence for ancestors. But contact with the Western world also placed them under a strong pressure to convert to Christianity.
It is our belief that when we are alive, our parents are the ones that take good care of us, and they are the ones that provide us with everything. And they love us unconditionally. And then even when they pass away, they still care about us dearly. And those will be the people that we worship, and those will be the people that whenever you call upon, they will be there for you.
Right now in America, probably around 40% or so still have the traditional belief, where 60% are probably Christian now in some sort of denominations, but about 40 still believe in the old Hmong traditional type of a belief, where the Hmong believe in one creator, one God that created the world, but also believe in reincarnation, that the parents or grandparents or ancestors die and become good spirit, leading the living through life.
Milwaukee has approximately about 5 to 6 Hmong churches. The congregation that I belong to is the Grace Hmong Alliance Church in Milwaukee. There are other Hmong churches in Milwaukee as well, such as Hmong Catholic churches, United Methodist churches, and also Lutheran churches, and a few other Hmong churches that I couldn't provide the name. Over the years, many Hmong individuals have converted themselves into Christianity because the traditional religion of the Hmong, which happen to be the animists, are very hard to practice here in the country. So many, particularly younger people, have converted themselves to become Christian.
In their Southeast Asian homelands, the Hmong had long established rural healing practices. Here, they encountered high-tech Western medicine.
Coming from a region where it's a tropical region where a lot of herbs, a lot of the traditional medicine is it's called green medicine or traditional medicine. There is still very widely used within the Hmong, and because they have a very good success in using traditional medicine like that, herbal medicine like that, that get translated into even in America. A lot of the Hmong can find a lot of things, a lot of herb even in this country to be useful for herbal medicine, and also a lot of herbal medicines are kept dry and sent over from Laos, from Thailand, and from that region.
My father was called to be a shaman because he was chosen in the family. It's in the family blood, and he was chosen as one of the shamans. The spirit comes to only the first son, and if your gene has it, the shaman will follow you, your sons. So my father was one of the ones that were chosen to be a shaman. Because of us, he has 9 daughters and 6 sons. He couldn't feed the shaman, and so his oldest brother had to take the shaman away so that he couldn't cure people no more. My father, when he do his shaman, he will go to the other side, and what he does is they cover his eyes with a black cloth so that he won't see, and then he is balanced between a long chair, and he has to jump on it. Not real high, but it depends on where he's going. And then there is somebody there also about three people. One guy, he's supporting my father. It makes a loud noise, and they have to do that constantly until he comes back, and then they will stop it. Or they will stop it when he asks for money, and then they will burn money, not real money, but paper-like money, and they will burn it so that he will. Because when he is on the other side, he will speak in the other side language, and the person that is watching my father at the moment has to understand what he's trying to say to other people and what he's trying to talk to the other side.
Today it is common for many Hmong to use Western medicine where they have observed good results, but still trust in the long-established healing practices as well. It has been this process, that of integrating the new while making efforts to retain the old, that has made this adaptive process amazing. Some Hmong scholars debate over the origin of the word Hmong, but most maintain that the word carries a connotation of freedom. Early Hmong linguistic scholar and Catholic priest Yves Bertré claims that the word had a connotation of free people, or those who must have their freedom and independence. It has been in this spirit that the Hmong have resisted the patterns often observed among other immigrant groups, that of acculturalization and assimilation. The amazing feature of the Hmong adaptation to American life is that they have not surrendered their own cultural practices. How have these been maintained? First, like many U.S. ethnic groups, the Hmong keep track of happenings in their previous homelands.
Within the radio program, we try to get information from the country that have the Hmong people live in, especially in Laos, Thailand, China, and some other country. And that way we can bring what happened over there in everyday life over here in America here. And that way people living here, they know and kind of get connection with people over there, knowing what they do every day and what happened every day.
Second, language preservation is a high priority. Virtually every Hmong family the anthropologists interviewed in Milwaukee discussed ways they maintain the Hmong language at home.
A lot of time right now what we try to do is that we try to educate our kids earlier so that way they can learn how to speak the Hmong language. For example, I have 2 kids, and at home we speak Hmong, because that way they can be fluent in Hmong, and when they get to be 5 to 6 years old, then they can learn how to speak English. That way their Hmong is more fluent.
Third, the clans and collective life remain central to Hmong social life. When the Hmong were initially settled in America, the U.S. government made attempts to disperse them widely among the 50 states so that no single locality would be overburdened with social service needs. But as soon as the Hmong adapted well enough to function on their own, they engaged in a secondary migration and reunited their clans. Today, the clans continue to play important roles in regulating marriage and other functions.
These clan leaders play very key roles in how the society is shaped and formed and how decisions are made. It comes down to critical things such as, does a couple stay married or divorce? It even goes to the simple things of how many children they're going to have in the family. And so clan leaders play very intricate roles in negotiating marriages, divorces, and any liens or any disputes within the community itself.
Within the whole Hmong populations, we have only 18 last names. And no matter where you live, people who have the same last name never get married to each other. They always consider each other's brothers and sisters, and always consider them part of the families, even though they are very remotely related back in maybe even a couple generations, but still considered, part of the family, never get married each other. And so that's one thing that keeps the Hmong all tied together and very family oriented. And that's why in this country too, you will see a lot of Hmong tend to gather in cities or in states that are populated because of that clan structure that the Hmong tend to pull each other to be together so that they can help each other out.
Well, in the Hmong culture, there are 3 methods of marriage. There is marriage by capture, which is where the groom captures the bride and takes her as his wife. There is marriage called the runaway marriage, which is where the bride chooses to run away with the groom. And then there's marriage by mediation. And for my wedding, I chose to have a marriage by mediation because it honors and brings respect to the family. And it especially honored my parents for upbringing me and then also honoring me as a woman.
Fourth, many Hmong rituals of long standing are alive and well in Milwaukee. These include spiritual and healing practices, plus the Hmong New Year.
Because in Laos, there's a lack of hospitals or medicine, many of our elders, most of our elders, they have a good knowledge of herbal medicines that we use in Laos. My grandma and my mom, they're very knowledgeable about herbal medicines, and sometimes when we're not feeling well, they always tell us what's good for us and what's not good as an alternative to Western medicine.
Hmong people celebrate New Year, and that would be after the harvest season where they have plenty of food to celebrate. And what they do is that they have a maypole, kind of like a pole in the middle, and they would tie a string to it. And then they would sacrifice a chicken, and then everybody kind of walk through the maypole. And it's kind of like Hawthorne's, one of Hawthorne's novel, The Maypole, and where people walk in and then it just kind of a renew of a new year, and then they would kill the chicken and then sacrifice the chicken. Everybody kind of walk around the maypole, and it's a symbol of New Year.
Lastly, even the horticultural practices are still maintained in this city. Hmong are able to keep their culinary preferences via urban gardening.
Even today around Milwaukee City, through UW Extension, through city and county land, a lot of Hmong family, including myself, we still holding on to the tradition of have our own fresh vegetables, such as do our own garden and do our own planting for the fresh vegetable that we need for diet, for everyday diet.
Through the process of adapting to American culture and still retaining their own practices, the Hmong have made important contributions to the wider society. One of these contributions that emerged very early was the Hmong farmers' markets. Another early contribution was the Hmong propensity to stabilize central city neighborhoods.
There were a lot of boarded up houses in the downtown area. So many of us start buying those houses, and then we fix. We do a lot of work, and then we fix those houses so we can have a place for our family. It is our belief, and back then and still now, that as a man, you have to have a roof to cover your families. And then I think that is a strong belief in our culture. And then to think about it, the verb rent never exists in our culture. Not only that those houses will help our family, will provide a place for our family to live, but I think that we did some good thing for the city of Milwaukee by holding on to those houses so they did not get tear down.
The Hmong left their sponsors early and developed their own self-supporting organizations and programs. In Milwaukee, they have their own newspapers, educational organizations, women's associations, arts and crafts clubs, a Hmong museum, their own food markets, youth programs, family services, and student associations. The Hmong have begun to have an impact on commerce.
When Hmong families began to move into Milwaukee during the early 80s, there are very few people that get a good jobs. There are very few people that buying homes due to lack of financial. But over the years, there are more and more nonprofit organizations that are established, and there are more and more business that are established to help provide resources to the Hmong families so that they can become a better citizen in this community. For example, that the Global Staffing Resources is an employment agency that I established back in '95. We had helped many Hmong families to obtain full-time employment and become economically self-sufficient.
And through education, the Hmong have advanced socially and economically in nearly every field they've entered.
Hmong parents do everything they can to save money so that they can support their children into a higher education. There is a group called the Hmong American Peace Academy, and that is going to be the first Hmong public school in the state of Wisconsin and the second school in the nation. And we are, established this institution to help Hmong parents and Hmong children to better our educational system in our own communities.
Right now, around the nations in the U.S. here, the Hmong probably have close to about 200 doctors in all different fields with the PhD in a number, and probably about triple of that numbers have a master's degree, and many thousands are with the bachelor's degrees and so forth.
This was the story of the Hmong who settled in the Midwestern city of Milwaukee. Perhaps no cultural group worldwide was less prepared for life in post-industrial metropolis than these Hmong. They came from a mountain home in Laos where they practiced slash and burn farming, had almost no access to high technology and formal education, were organized in complex clan systems, revered their ancestors, and had their own non-Western healing practices. They came to America on the heels of collective lives decimated by the secret war in Laos and years in refugee camps. Within one generation, these Hmong have adapted to urban American life, making major contributions in education, stabilizing neighborhoods, and the development of programs, organizations, and businesses. The amazing part of their adaptive process was that the Hmong continue to find their place in mainstream urban America without sacrificing the core of their cultural practices. By retaining many of their practices, they add another contribution, that of enriching the cultural landscape of one Midwestern city.